Lou, of all the things going on, what do you think is most important in the world today? What's number one on your radar screen?
Well, number one, first of all, Alex, great to be with you again and have an opportunity to talk with you about these issues. The number one issue, as far as I'm concerned right now, is restoring the rule of the majority to our government and making certain this great constitutional republic is led and conducts itself in concert with our national values and ideals, whether we're talking about foreign policy, whether we're talking about the wars that are underway in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, or whether we're talking about how to restore prosperity to this country and to create jobs and wealth and to get this great country moving.
Well, when you talk about the Constitution under assault, undoubtedly, out of the gates, going back now 4 weeks ago, the UN comes out and says we have a resolution to start bombing Libya, and the president didn't even consult with Congress. At least Bush went and got a resolution for force.
Exactly, and by the way, the man whom this president is a candidate, accused of being a unilateralist, went before the United Nations and got their approval, support, and cooperation, as well as the United States Congress, and they did it twice, both in Afghanistan and Iraq. If you will, the contradiction is stunning on the part of Mr. Obama.
And now it's a stalemate, and they say it's not going well, so there's more and more discussions by top generals of putting ground troops in, not just CIA advisors.
Unfortunately, that's exactly right. And the military analysts with whom I've spoken, and a number of former generals who are very close to obviously the general staff of the Pentagon, saying point blank that they cautioned this administration against taking on Muammar Gaddafi and opening hostilities against Libya, and now they are cautioning against the ground troops because they have said from the outset that nothing can be assured without our forces on the ground. And as we know, particularly the instance of Afghanistan, Alex, we know that doesn't assure a timely outcome either.
No, it certainly doesn't, and that's 4 different major conflicts: Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Libya.
Right.
And we have the French pouring into the Ivory Coast, removing one thug, and now openly installing the other rebel leader, who they admit's been running around with his people with machetes, chopping up men, women, and children.
Yeah, the involvement of the French in the Ivory Coast, wherever the French have gone over history, as you well know, they have left independent nations that were former French colonies in horrible shape. The Ivory Coast being exploited by the West for its natural resources, most prominently oil. This is a mess, and whether one styles it as NATO or the French and the United Kingdom or the United States and NATO or just the United States, somebody needs to take a very deep breath and say, wait a minute, is this who America is? Is this who Americans are? Is this the nation that we want to be? And I think most Americans would say absolutely not.
Absolutely. The polls show that. Lou Dobbs, host of Lou Dobbs Tonight on Fox Business Network, LouDobbs.com. We'll be right back with him to continue along this important line of discussion, these UN wars. Stay with us.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done's been right.
It is Friday, the 15th day of April 2011, and we've got a real treat as far as those that want to know what's really happening in the world, with a wide breadth of analysis on the economy, geopolitical developments. He was one of the founding members there at CNN when it kicked off in the early 1980s. He, of course, needs no introduction, Lou Dobbs, and he's the host at 7 p.m. Eastern on Fox Business Network of Lou Dobbs Tonight. He also, from 2 p.m. Eastern also hosts a very successful syndicated radio broadcast. The website's LouDobbs.com. Of course, our websites are Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com, and GCNLive.com. and there's a host of issues. Donald Trump, does Lou think he's really going to run? Has Lou heard any word about who's going to be replacing Glenn Beck during that slot? What's his take on inflation, the budget? We're going to cover it all with Lou Dobbs here today. But out of the gates, Lou, going back a decade or more, I remember watching you on CNN. You're the real trailblazer on mainline cable television. You were just going off their own statements, the UN's own statements, the Council on Foreign Relations' own statements about a supranational, private corporate banking world government, eroding national sovereignty, Media Matters, George Soros. Others really targeted you when you did it in a very level-headed, well-documented way. Really, you're the precursor on mainline TV of some of the things Beck did in a little bit more, carnival-type way. And I mean, I don't mean that meanly. It's just,
I understand.
And so here you are completely vindicated. You were always vindicated because you were just going off the documents and the elitist own statements. But now open announcements every day in the Washington Post, Financial Times of London, global government, private banking system, end of the dollar, Obama following the orders of the UN, not even consulting Congress to start this new war. Now they're talking about ground troops. What is it like a decade after you began to be the first to expose this on mainline TV, to be demonized, to be attacked, to have somebody shoot at your house, to go through all of this, to expose the North American Union, and now it's almost passé, but you were demonized for it?
Yeah, and of course, as you know, Alex, that's the reflex of the left in this country, and I expect to be attacked for taking positions that aren't popular with the left, and that's fine, because my interest is America and Americans, and that is just where that's where I happen to reside intellectually, emotionally, physically. And I make no apology for being an American who is concerned most about America and Americans. It's that straightforward. And to see whether, and what my great concern in all of this over the years, though, has been, aside from a position on any one of these developments, so that our audience understands that when we make a deal with the United Nations, when we sign on to the World Trade Organization, for that matter, when we're part of NATO, we are at some margin, at some level, and in some cases at an extreme level, consigning away this nation's sovereignty. And we are deferring national interest to a broader interest, whether it be a European interest, whether it be a global interest, or whether it be an Asian interest. It doesn't matter. But our leaders, our elites, have on too many occasions sought to obfuscate that reality and to act, to pretend as though there's no consequence or implication for the well-being of the American people or the national interest. And I find that to be not only hypocrisy, but frankly un-American.
Lou Dobbs is our guest. Lou, when you, over the last decade, talk about globalists, talk about elitists, you would put up quotes from the Council on Foreign Relations, from Robert Pastor, from the internal SPP documents that Judicial Watch sued and got, and then Judicial Watch and others you had on your show had the documents, but still Media Matters and others would imply it was a conspiracy theory. But from your research, who are these international interests? Who are these elitists, and what is their overall goal? And from your research, why is that basically in direct opposition to the interest of our free republic? Well,
let me answer the latter part first, if I may, Alex, and that is this free republic, this great constitutional republic, is utterly dependent on an informed citizenry and an engaged and participatory citizen. And what is occurring now is a constraint of information. One would think that given the internet, all of the various media, and all of the vehicles of communication, that American citizens would be better informed than ever, know far more about the public policy choices that are being made, whether it's in Congress, whether it's in the bureaucracy of the executive, whether it's in the judiciary. But in point of fact, we know less today than we did 50 years ago about what our government is doing. And the reasons for it are many, but among them has been a decision among elites, and by the way, I'm talking about, frankly, both political parties, in one way or another, being involved in an effort to simply preside rather than to represent, and to do so with a view that they somehow are ordained to lead rather than dependent upon the consent of the governed. So when we start talking about the elites that are, if you will, not necessarily conspiring, but certainly acting as if they were in collusion and concert to create the North American Union, it's an empirical statement. It's based on fact. It's not a question of ideology. It's not a question of philosophy or partisanship. The reality is that the Security and Prosperity Partnership is the foundation and was intended as a foundation to bring three countries together: Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And that harmonization, as they like to call it, and I'm talking about the elites of the United States military and that of the Canadians and Mexico, our business elites, our political elites, and frankly, they're represented again by both political parties, are working to bring about not only a customs union, not only a common currency, but an actual consolidation of three nations into one.
Well, that's what's so frustrating, is that you are covering real information, like if you were a weatherman and a thunderstorm blew through and the water measuring meters said 1.5 inches of rain fell, and you're sitting there with the rain gauge showing the rain. Everybody knows this is happening. And then they're moving forward, these elites, with these programs, but then they have no respect for the general public and play this deceptive game of saying Lou Dobbs is lying to you, when we have this ruling political international class that, as you said, tries to rule by deception and doesn't want the people involved in governing through their representatives.
Yeah, you use the word rule. I would use the word attempt to influence. And the effect in some instances may be the same, Alex, but what we are truly watching is an effort on the part of a group of elites worldwide who wish to bring about a one world order. It may not be particularly a new world order, since the effort has been underway for some time. But that is one of the tensions that's obviously at work in our global society.
And you look at this global order they're trying to establish, it's very undemocratic. It is against sovereignty. It is always openly anti-family. Anything that is independent, anything that they can't control, they want us dependent. That's what these elites want, these mega corporations that aren't free market. That's their goal. I want to read to you a headline, if we can put it back on screen. And I first saw this in the news in 2002, and when I would cover it, even in the Washington Post as a footnote, people couldn't believe it. But here is the Ottawa Citizen, one of the big papers in Canada, for those that don't know, February 22nd, 2008. This is 3 years ago. And there's new articles on this as well as part of the Continental Security Perimeter. And it says, Canada, U.S. agree to use each other's troops in civil emergencies. And if you read the Pentagon agreement with Canada and Mexico, it says we will aid each other during civil unrest. So, and I've had generals on who are retired that say, yes, this has been in the works for a long time, right, to use foreign troops in America and vice versa. I mean, it doesn't get any more crazy or New World Order than that.
And it is, again, for the very reason you stated, it is not a matter of public knowledge. It is not a part of the consciousness of American society and the voting public. And this reflex that has grown up over the course of particularly the last 30 years in this country, speaking only about America, that either political party, leaders, elected leaders of this country, would in any way seek to deny a larger body of public knowledge is to be contemptible. And the national media has too often worked as not only a willing but an eager accomplice, particularly to the left and the Democratic Party itself. I mean, when you look at the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, CBS, NBC, Evening News, I mean, these are effectively effectively, House organs for the Democratic Party. And that's unfortunate because we need watchdogs in our fourth estate, not lapdogs. And unfortunately, most of the national liberal media is actually focused on performing that role of lapdog and helper rather than watchdog.
Well, that was my next issue. As the establishment media kind of circles the wagons with the political class, we're seeing Jay Rockefeller, we're seeing Lieberman, we're seeing all these statements, Cass Sunstein, about restricting the free press, fairness doctrine, taxes on what they call conspiracy theories, things that they, and Cass Sunstein, of course, the regulations are listed, not believing in man-made global warming. Well, we see Arianna Huffington saying, how do we shut down Fox News? How do we shut down Glenn Beck? We see 2 weeks ago in Politico, I don't know if you saw it, the chilling memos from the head of Media Matters saying we are going to guerrilla infiltrate with spies and organizations. We're going to destroy not just Fox News, but this list of conservative sites. And you go there, you're being demonized, I'm being demonized, Judge Napolitano. I mean, these people aren't what even you'd call a liberal. I mean, they're more like Joe Stalin or something. I mean, they really are authoritarian and scary.
They are authoritarian in outlook and I think in value structure, which makes them extraordinarily dangerous. Not necessarily to Fox News, but to the country. When media takes on a role that is utterly destructive in intent and purpose, and that is precisely what many of these advocacy organizations do, and they pretend to be some sort of watchdog organization, but they pretend to be performing that role when they are, in fact, advocacy and activist organizations. But the great thing, Alex, is that the American people are getting a very clear look at who, what they are, and what their designs are. That's healthy for the nation, and I'm delighted to see that light shine very brightly on who they are and what they're up to.
Well, I don't want to spend all our time on that group, but, I mean, they are 501c3, and I know mild libertarian groups who have their 501c3 jerked for just getting involved, in stating their opinion. How can they be a pure house organ of George Soros, openly calling for the end of free speech in America, and then be given 501c3? I mean, that is very discriminatory.
It is. It's at the very least curious, and the use of 501c3s in our society is something I think that ought to be looked at, irrespective of the ideology or the intent. We have become a nation of nonprofits that are starting to supplant, in many ways, to me, Alex, traditionally the functions of government, particularly at the local and county and state level. I worry less about the federal level, honestly, the national level. But we need to understand what the implications are for all of these nonprofits that have grown up over the years. And they've grown up, by the way, they number in the millions. Some of them with the very best of purposes, but the fact is we are diluting our system of government through those nonprofits, NGOs, and other entities that have been created. I'd much prefer people turn to government for the services that should be provided.
Well, isn't that an unfair playing field, too? I mean, the UN model is these NGOs. I mean, here's an example. I want your take on this. Thousands of waivers handed out to Fortune 500, but even smaller groups that have given campaign contributions to the Democrats and Obama. With its hundreds of thousands of employees, McDonald's gets a waiver on buying insurance for its employees. Sure. But if this stuff gets implemented, I've got to get insurance for all of my employees, and I will take part of their check to do it. So isn't that an unfair trade advantage that a hamburger place right next to McDonald's, a mom and pop, they've got to get insurance, but McDonald's doesn't? So if you go, pay money to the emperor, he then waves his wand and gives you an unfair trade advantage?
I don't think there's any question about it whatsoever. It is not only unfair, but so transparently patronage that it's nauseating. When you look at the principal beneficiary of these waivers, the United Auto Workers Union. What is the principal beneficiary of these waivers? You go beyond that, it's the supporters of this administration who receive received the greatest amount of money, which, by the way, wasn't even revealed publicly by the administration or the Democratic leadership in Obamacare. The principal beneficiary of the early retirement support program, which amounts to $5 billion, goes to the United Auto Workers Union. So, I mean, it just goes on and on.
Incredible. A lot of other questions in the limited time we've got left for you. What do you see coming up in this next election? We see the $40 billion cut. Ron Paul has come out and said that it was all basically stuff that had already been agreed to cut and what was left over from highway funds. He's even saying Ryan's budget isn't going to fix things. If we don't stop the banker bailouts and deal with what the Federal Reserve's doing, monetizing the debt and devaluing the currency, that all of this is window dressing. Lou Dobbs is a real financial expert, decades in the trenches. What's your view on what's happening with the budget?
Well, I had the opportunity to talk with a congressman 2 days ago, and we discussed exactly these issues, Alex. And the congressman does question whether or not any of this is sufficient, given that there are larger issues in his views, and of course, principal among those, the Federal Reserve and the banking system. And the reforms that are necessary, it's unquestionable that we need to reform our banking system, that we need to take a very strong look and reorganize, in my judgment, the Federal Reserve. But that is a long-term effort. It's going to take years to accomplish. What I am so pleased with is that Congressman Paul Ryan has come forward with the boldest, most effective, in my opinion, budget plan to deal with deficits. Not the national debt, but deficit in history. Unfortunately, that's the kind of plan that is necessary because we've got, as you know, the greatest debt and the most tremendous deficits in our history. But he has, with I think, an opening stake, set the bar very high. And as we watched, the president couldn't come close to it with a rather feeble fiscal policy speech that he gave at George Washington University Wednesday.
Well, Lou, as you know, Kennedy in the one bracket cut taxes about 50% in 61, the other bracket 30-something percent, I forget the exact number, and tax receipts doubled. California's increased taxes, and their tax receipts are going down. They're not stupid. Obviously, Obama and these collectivists want to wreck the economy so they can come in as the saviors and get more people to basically beach themselves, on their system by wrecking it. And now we have this chilling statement by Geithner today at CNBC. It's also CNN Fox is reporting, saying that if they don't basically increase the budget and raise the taxes, that Republicans will be to blame for the U.S. defaulting. Right as 70% of the treasuries are now being monetized. I mean, this is this scares me that they're now positioning the Tea Party, i.e. Republicans and others, as being to blame for this. This is amazing. I mean, this shows me they think the default could be close.
Yeah, here's what it shows me, Alex. One, it shows me that our Treasury Secretary, Timothy Geithner, is somewhat limited both in his outlook toward the consequences of a decision that would be taken not to raise the debt. One. Two, it suggests to me that he has a relatively either limited knowledge of banking itself or the role of the federal government when it comes to the Treasury Department. There is no default is requisite or a logical conclusion to not raising the debt ceiling. Let me be very clear about that. There are choices to be made by the administration should the Congress elect not to raise the debt ceiling. None of those decisions require default. And anyone who says that it does is utterly and completely mistaken. And I would be delighted to have step forward and explain themselves, because not a single person I respect with a knowledge of finance, public or corporate finance, will support that view.
Well, is it not
what's being spread by the media?
Mr. Dobbs, is it not a replay of what the central bankers did in October 2008 when they said, give us unlimited money or there'll be a depression? I mean, is this not a form of economic terrorism to threaten default, which itself will hurt the dollar to get their way?
Alex, I think that your point is a terrific one. I think any time a public official and a servant of the American people stands up in Washington, D.C. and says that Armageddon is the result of a public policy choice that is not the one they desire, everyone in the national media should be skeptical and point out that position and where it stands historically. That isn't what's happening with this national media. Our national media, the liberal media, tends to think it's responsible somehow to act as an instrument of the state, and that's unfortunate.
Well, our time went quick. Let me say bye to you during this break, Lou. And I know you may have another interview coming up. You have your own show coming up. Or I'll see if I can hold you maybe 5 minutes in the next segment. If you can't, I'll understand. I'll ask during the break because I want to get in.
Oh, man, we are here. Sorry.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Okay, we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. On the other side, I've got a few more questions. Amazing information from Lou Dobbs.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Okay, just got a few minutes left with Lou. He's got to get ready for his own show, LouDobbs.com. Of course, 7 o'clock Eastern, Fox Business Channel with his program as well, now unbridled from CNN. Lou, in closing, I wanted to ask you about inflation and then your view on Donald Trump. I thought he was just joking around and getting some attention and injecting some of his ideas, but more and more listening to him, I was listening to him last night, he really sounds like he's probably going to run. What's your take on that first and then inflation?
I think that Donald is having Donald is having a lot of fun, Alex. He is very entertaining, no question about it. I cannot, just as straightforward as I can be about this, I mean, I can't read the man. At first, like you, I thought, all right, the Donald's, he's kind of kidding around here. But the more time goes by, he seems to be digging deeper into the possibility of running. I do think that when he makes it clear he's going to announce on the last installment of The Apprentice, that I'm a little suspicious about what the outcome may be.
Absolutely. Well, if he did run, what's your overall view? He doesn't like NAFTA and GATT and things. What do you think about him?
First of all, he's a smart, he's an accomplished guy. I'm leery, forgive me for saying this, but I'm leery of billionaires who want to be in politics. That's not to say that I would support him if it turned out he was the candidate. I'm just simply saying to me, billionaires have got a higher bar because, I'm a little suspicious of it, and I'm the power that they already have, let alone what they would bring to the office. That's just me.
Very briefly, what's your view on him saying, show the original birth certificate, not just the receipt of the birth certificate?
Well, it's interesting. I believe there's no question that Barack Obama is the citizen of the United States. What I'm curious about is obviously Donald Trump's expressed. Why not just get rid of this nonsense and present a birth certificate and be done with it? That's the intriguing political question for me. But I think that frankly, when we're looking at $14 trillion in national debt, think about this: $1.7 trillion in deficits. When we've got a government that is dysfunctional, when we have our troops deployed all around the world, engaged in a global fight against terror. When we've got men and women dying, I think we've got, bigger issues to take on.
Lastly, the head of Walmart CEOs come out and said inflation is going to be, quote, serious. We're already seeing it in oil, gold, silver, other commodities. Right. And then the federal government's telling us there's no inflation problem at all. What's your take on that in closing?
Very quickly, inflation is as big a problem as we permit it to be. The fact that this president comes out with an energy plan 5 weeks ago doesn't even mention the current high prices of gasoline and crude oil and doesn't indicate any willingness to confront OPEC, which is a cartel, to make certain these prices don't move higher, get them off the back of the American working man and woman is unconscionable. So I think inflation could be a problem, but it'll be a failure of leadership, not an economic result.
Sure, as Obama moves to also block more discovery and production of oil here domestically. Lou Dobbs, LouDobbs.com. Thank you for spending so much time with us, and we'll be listening to you on the radio tonight.
Always good to talk with you, Alex. Thanks.
All right, thank you. There goes Lou Dobbs. Very interesting 37-minute interview with him today. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.